Hello everyone and welcome to Getting to Know Carnival Edition. Now, before we get into Trinidad's carnival, we must cover the history of soca. And so it says here that soca was created from humble beginnings but has become synonymous of the Caribbean carnival culture. Soca is rooted in calypso, which, like other Caribbean music of the time, straddled between being very socially conscious and politically aware and music that was very explicit and sexual. Soca grew to be music that one could let their hair down and simply celebrate life and good times too. The women would wind their hips and the men would jump, and scattered through the crowd would be a sea of happy people dancing, covered in sweat and paint, while playing what seems to be Edward 40 hands with a bottle of rum. As carefree as one can only hope to be. The word soca has an interesting story that I will let the creator of the genre, Ross Shorty I, now known as Lord Shorty, explain.
When soca was first invented, there was no name. But there was a vibration that they now call chutney soca. Okay?
In Rani?
Yes. All right? This is where the soca whole thing began. I combined two rhythms, calypso and East Indian music together. I had no name, but what came out of that is what you now call chutney soca today. Okay? In the following year, I did a complete album, The Love Man, and all my tracks had the same rhythm, the East Indian and the African thing together. And the Africans complained that I was spoiling calypsos. The Indian complained that I was desecrating the music. So what I did was simply take the feeling that you got from the two rhythmic structures and put them on traditional instruments. I took out the East Indian drum, I took out the dantal, I took out the mandolin, and I put it on the drum set, the triangle, and the guitar. So what you had was the same thing, but without the East Indian musical instruments. And now I name it S-O-K-A-H. The K-H was to reflect the East Indian influence into the music because Ka is the first letter in the Sanskrit alphabet. It represents movement, and soca is the power of movement. That's all.
So we have the soul of calypso music with its African roots and Caribbean aesthetic, along with the East Indian chutney music sound. But what about carnival, I hear you ask? And how did we get from this to this? Well, to complete this story, we're going to have to jump a little further back. The word itself comes from the Latin carne levarium, which meant to put away or say farewell to meat as a part of Lent. But if we go even further back, the first dated carnival we know of began with the sun-worshipping Egyptians and was later adapted by the Romans after King Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BC. To the Egyptians, it was a celebration of the coming spring and an end to winter. To the Romans, though, Bachanalia was one of the many pagan Roman celebrations.
Saturnalia,
Parentalia,
Lupercalia.
Bacchanalia.
I thought we said we weren't going to bring that one up.
But this festival was not like the others. Named Bachanalia by those who participated in the ritual, it became a 5-day-long festival in honor of Bacchus, the Greco-Roman god of wine, intoxication, freedom, and ecstasy. In short, as Everett Shen put it so eloquently, Bachanalia would look something like this. Seems wholesome. And then following a complicated history, some guy saying be nice to your neighbor goes viral, gets a lot of followers, then he's apparently canceled by some pilot, fanboys blog an entire book about his life, copy and paste some pagan rituals, and a few thousand oversimplified years later, we have this.
In the Catholic calendar, Carnivale
farewell to meat, is a feast before the fast of Lent. In 18th century Italy, people preparing for Lent would throw indulgent fancy dress parties and gorge before the fast. As Christianity spread across Europe, so too did the celebration of Carnival. Colonization exported it across the world. Portuguese colonists took Lent to the shores of Brazil, where they had also taken an estimated 4 million African slaves. Over time, European rituals fused with African ones to create Brazil's world-famous carnival. On the Caribbean island of Trinidad, the Festival of Lent was introduced by French colonists. Slaves, excluded from these celebrations, created their own parties to the soundtrack of calypso music, which mocked the French. This is now an integral part of Trinidad's carnival.
So yes, Carnival originated during a period when the slaves banned from attending their masters' fancy balls and parties would improvise their own celebrations by staging their own costume event in their quarters. And after emancipation, these former slaves challenged the plantation owners to publicly host their own carnival celebrations. Throughout the years, the formerly enslaved islanders would continue to host these celebrations, often with elaborate costumes and acts that told stories of freedom and subtly mocked their captors. These celebrations continue to spread to many parts of the colonized lands, which allows you to notice commonalities within countries that specifically celebrate carnival culture. A century later, with a legacy of masquerades, citizens and visitors of Trinidad and Tobago personify the freedom of self through that euphoria that emanates whether a costume is worn, music is heard, or simply just by watching it all. Carnival Today is an inclusive, elaborate billion-dollar event for over 50 countries, including Trinidad and Tobago. Like other formerly colonized lands that host Carnival, these celebrations take place on the Monday, colloquially known in Trinidad as Juve, which is French for break day, which is followed by fêtes, like parties, and celebrations of Fat Tuesday directly before Ash Wednesday, usually taking place in either February or March. And activities on the 2 days take the form of street parades by bands of costume masqueraders. The website Destination Trinidad and Tobago says the history of Carnival brings to bear the singular characteristics that connects us all to the past. Freedom. Carnival was a celebration observed by the French plantocracy as they bade farewell to the flesh with masquerade parties before Catholic observance of Lent. But African plantation workers also celebrated Carnival with drumology and dance. They mocked their plantation owners in dress as they paraded through their villages. They also covered themselves in oil and molasses to depict the darker side of Carnival. A carnival band could comprise as many as 3,000 masqueraders. And to control this number of people on the streets, organizers would divide the band into sections of 200 to 500 masqueraders. Most carnival bands are led by a king and queen, some of whom had competed on Dimanche class or Carnival Sunday. The center for the 2-day parade of the bands in Trinidad and Tobago is Port of Spain. However, similar street parties are held in and around all of the island. Now, back to Lord Shorty and Soca.
The purpose of soca in the 70s was to bring the East Indians and the Africans in Trinidad together. So there was a combination of the two main rhythmic structures in Trinidad to create a sound that would be totally Trinidad.
With his album Endless Vibrations, like a local islander meeting a spring breaker fresh off the boat, he inserted soca into musical history as a genre that would forever find itself in between the winding waste of women worldwide. Through the 1980s, soca was picked up by many other English-speaking Caribbean islands and artists like Chris Blue and Chris Tombo Herbert.
I don't mind we practice the cultures that come from a foreign land. But we have our own thing right here that needs even more attention. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Who added more upbeat sounds and connected the music to carnival culture. Now, as I began bouncing around the womb and the 1990s rolled in, we began hearing an explosion of newcomers jumping in and around the growing soca movement, like Ivor George,
Mashing up is my business. That affects how much more. That's just my only interest. I'm playing bands for sure. Some people they say they're ready to misbehave. Some people they say they're ready to cross the stage. Show me a hand in the band, in the band, in the band. Here's a band in the band. Match up the land in the band. Show me a hand if you're a fan.
Marshall Montano, and many more. As the hype continued, the inevitable storm of pre-comment section criticisms began to pile up with claims that the music was too simplistic, unable to grow past the drunken carnival scene, would never graduate from college or find financial stability, probably start a YouTube channel. Gain international recognition. Everyone thought it would live and die jumping in place in the Caribbean, unlike popular music like reggae. That was until the end of the 1990s when we saw the emergence of viral artists spreading across the internet like Square One, Crossfire, and at the head of the so-called Bayesian invasion was Rupee and Tess with their smash hit Tempted to Touch in 2002, which landed on the top hits in places like Australia and Sweden, and even reaching #1 in the US top charts in 2004. At this point, soca was no longer fighting for recognition as a music genre, but was fighting to organize and make sense of the explosion of many different subgenres of soca music that were sliding into the sweaty ears of the world's youth.
Soca has also spawned several subgenres, including Chinese soca, groovy soca, power soca, raga soca, and parang soca. The genre has also made strides as soundtracks for mainstream Hollywood films such as After the Sunset, which featured Tempted to Touch by Rupee, The Mighty Quinn, and The Cutting Edge, which both featured Groove Master by singer Arrow.
Everybody move. Let your body move. Show me
As well as Differentology by Bungie Garlin, which was most recently played on an episode of American drama series Grey's Anatomy. There have also been a couple of chart limbers like Hot 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 by Arrow, Who Let the Dogs Out by the Baha Men, and Soul on Fire by KMC.
Today, soca music is so prolific with new artists like Bungie Garlin, Marshall Monteith, and Pasif and Tulip who experiment with its sound on an international stage to the point that it has surpassed Calypso in global recognition and is no longer just music to jump to. It has become so contemporary in today's culture that it has likely jumped into your vacation Spotify list or Netflix selections without you even realizing it. And so, in the next time when you walk by a lively get-together and you hear songs like Roll It Gal, or everyone's favorite, Turn Me On, let me hold you, girl, caress my body, you got me going crazy. I'm sorry. Just know that you can thank Lord Shorty Eye and some frisky Romans. Well, thank you for watching, and now it's my time to...
Drink water and mind my business. Mind my business. Drink water and mind my business. I go drink water and mind my business. Mind my business. Drink water and mind my business.
Wait, what are we doing here? Well, I guess, what am I doing here? I'm kind of talking to myself. But I really wanted to show you guys, a lot of Trinidad and get to know Trinidad. But it looks like from these videos on the internet, I just can't do it right. You know what? I think I got an idea. Have you ever sat there and wondered what it's like to go visit another country, to get out of your comfort zone and see what it's like living in a different culture, different place with some different food? maybe even speak in a different language? Well, me too. So, my name is Todos, and what I like to do is travel and get to know different places, different people, and see what it's like. The good, the bad, paradise, danger. So, let's pack our bags and take a trip. This time, we'll be going to Trinidad, and we'll see some of the food, music, and the life. So let's get ready and get to know Trinidad.